Heroes promise protection, they promise order, they promise comfort, but here's the question we're never supposed to ask. Who does the system really serve? Because in words like My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer, suffering doesn't disappear, it's just edited out. And when a story stays clean for too long, it's usually because something ugly was buried to keep it that way. Every hero story tells you who the villain is. Very few ask who benefits from that decision. So today, I want to ask the question Shōnen avoids. Who does the hero system really serve? Because when authority calls itself protection, someone is always paying the price for that comfort. In this video, we're going to take a look behind the curtains. I spend a lot of my free time writing stories no one will ever read, not because they're unfinished, but because they ask questions that the original series never wanted to answer. What happens when the monsters aren't the problem, but the system that decided who gets called one? What happens when heroes don't fail, they simply do their job? Today, I want to talk about the dark side of heroes, not because they're evil, but because they work. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. If a hero kills to protect a system, and the system is run, who exactly did they save? Because in My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer, justice isn't about stopping evil, it's about keeping order, and order has a body count. I write a lot of original characters for anime worlds I love, not power fantasies, not self-inserts. I write judges. Characters who don't ask who's good or who's evil. They ask who benefits, who is sacrificed, and who decided this was justice. That's why my characters always feel like they don't belong, because they aren't meant to break the world, they're meant to expose it. This is not a power scaling video, this is an ethical autopsy. Hero society doesn't collapse because of villains, it survives because of them. In MHA, we're taught to look at Shigaraki and Dabi as separations. Failures of character, monsters born from bad choices, but that framing is convenient. It keeps the systems clean, it lets the audience believe that if people had just been better, none of this would have happened. That is the lie the world tells itself to sleep at night. Shigaraki wasn't born a villain, he was born unseen, a child decaying in the streets beneath hero billboards that promised salvation, surrounded by power, abandoned by responsibility. Everyone waited for a hero to arrive, no one asked why none of them did. Another villain made by the system was Dabi. Dabi wasn't born cruel, he was manufactured, a boy molded into a weapon by a legacy-obsessed hero culture that values results over lives, symbols over children. When he broke, the system didn't ask what it had done wrong, it buried him and moved on. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Villains like them are not failures of hero society, they are byproducts. Hero society is a machine designed to preserve its own image. When it fails, it doesn't stop, it redirects the damage. It chooses who would carry the cost so the public never has to see the cracks. That's where the good heroes come from. Izuku Midoriya is not corrupt, that's what makes this painful. Deku is earnest, compassionate, and genuinely wants to save people, but he operates inside a system that kills to protect its narrative. A system that raises child soldiers like Hawks, strips them of childhood, morality, and choice, and calls it necessary. Hawks was not trained, he was conditioned. And when heroes like Deku see this, know this, and keep moving forward without confrontation, without resistance, without refusal, something happens. They are stained, not by malice, by silence. A system does not need evil participants to function. It only needs good people who are willing to look away. Hero society rewards obedience, it punishes disruption. Those who ask why are labeled threats. Those who comply are elevated as symbols, and symbols are easier to control than humans. So when Shigaraki burns it all down, the story frames him as chaos incarnate, but what he is really doing is exposing the truth the system refuses to face. If your peace requires abandoned children, erased failures, and disposable lives, then your peace was never just. Now contrast this with Demon Slayer, or rather, what Demon Slayer refuses to show. It's not about what we see in Demon Slayer, it's about what we don't. We are told demons are cruel, we are shown demons as righteous. The line is clean, comforting, simple, too simple. With basic logic alone, demons like Tamayo should not be rare, they should be common. Children turned against their will, people forced to consume their loved ones to survive, victims waking up as monsters in a world that offers them no path to redemption, only execution. And yet the narrative insists, demons must die, no hesitation, no inquiry, no accountability. The Hashira grow jaded, efficient, absolute, death becomes policy. We never see the slayer who looks the other way for profit, the one who accepts a bribe, the one who lets a demon feed quietly so long as it isn't inconvenient. We never see corruption, not because it won't exist, but because acknowledging it would destabilize the moral simplicity of the world. We never see the tragedy behind the world's monsters, and that absence matters, because when a story refuses to show corruption on the side of authority, it becomes propaganda, whether it intends to or not. This isn't about adding gore, this isn't about being edgy, it's about moral responsibility. A world where demons exist but no slayers corrupt is not a hopeful world, it's an incomplete one. A fantasy that avoids asking the questions real life demands we confront, because in reality there are corrupt police officers who wear the same badges as good ones, mayors who take kickbacks while their town rots, and systems that claim to reduce suffering while quietly deciding who deserves it. Stories shape how we understand power. When fiction refuses to interrogate authority, it teaches us to accept it. When it paints systems as righteous by default, it trains us to excuse harm as collateral. The tragedy of My Hero Academia is that it almost says something profound, but stops short. The tragedy of Demon Slayer is that it never looks back. Both worlds are filled with monsters. The difference is this: one admits they exist, the other insists they don't. And in both cases, the most dangerous monsters are not the ones with fangs of decay or fire. They are the systems that work, the heroes who comply, and the silence that tells us this is the cost of peace. Most shonen systems operate on individual morality, personal redemption, visible villains, and clean heroes. While on the other hand, I ask second-order ethical questions, which is why my ideas feel too sharp for canon. I don't ask, are heroes bad? I ask, what kind of good requires silence to function? That's the kind of question shonen avoids because it destabilizes the power fantasies, it's clear moral binaries, and audience comfort. One of my hobbies is writing original fanfiction characters for MHA or Demon Slayer that haven't seen the light of day. Indulge my thoughts here since there's a point to it. After all, I started making them due to this reader's very topic being a thorn in my side when it comes to these two stories for years. For Demon Slayer, I have What If There Was a Judge Among Monsters as Muzan's secret Upper Moon Zero. I have a character named Saigen Sugihara. His name means the moon that weeps for the earth. Saigen meaning solemn judgment, while Sugihara evokes moonlight over a barren field, a name steeped in stoicism and sorrow. The one Muzan never summoned unless absolute necessary. A shadow spoken in blood of the ancients, a being whispered about even in Kokushibo's memories, equal to Yorchi in potential, but twisted toward a different truth. Saigen does not radiate brute force, he radiates judgment. His power isn't loud or cruel, it's quiet, cold, and ancient, like a forgotten god watching a burning temple from a mountain cliff. Humans feel shame around him, humans feel exposed. He's not wrathful, he's not righteous, he is disappointed. He walks the line between predator and prophet. Saigen isn't interesting because he's strong, he's interesting because he induces shame, forces self-reflection, and exposes moral laziness on both sides. He's not wrath, he's not justice, he's disappointment made flesh. That's devastating in a world like Demon Slayer, where slayers are framed as pure, demons are framed as irredeemable, economic exploitation is ignored, all our neglect is invisible unless it's dramatic. Saigen doesn't need to kill slayers to indict them. His existence alone says, if you profit from suffering you refuse to see, what makes you different? The slayers sometimes forget that killing demons isn't the goal, it's protecting the people. My OC character for MHA, the Phantom Emperor, or also called Harbinger, is a morally complex anti-hero, a condemned villain sent to Japan to stop Shigaraki, but slowly got into the commission as long as it solidified their control. My Phantom Emperor isn't dangerous because he doesn't oppose hero society from the outside. He works within the commission, exploiting their hypocrisy all while using fear of instability against them. That's the exact blind spot MHA has. The series knows the commission is corrupt, but it never allows a sustainable moral reckoning. Both of these characters have something in common. Saigen Sugihara and the Phantom Emperor embody characters in a world that specifically are made to undermine their systems. The Phantom Emperor takes a closer look at hero society in MHA the author didn't touch. That character shows the heroes as morally corruptible, the commission tolerating a villain's influence as long as it solidifies their control, which the character exploits that weakness to sink themselves in deeper and expose the rot. That story asks a fundamental question that the original series didn't answer. Heroes work for a system that kills to protect its image, but ask yourself, who are they really protecting? The people or their power? And doesn't morally good heroes like Deku not stopping them make him complicit? Upper Moon Zero, Saigen Sugihara shows that the Slayers in Demon Slayer can be close-minded when it comes to demons. Some are good like Tamayo, some Slayers might just be demons in human skin, look the other way if they can profit from it. Slayers might neglect the people they protect, and let rot settle into places like the entertainment district. For MHA, I correctly identify something the series sidesteps. Heroes operate within systems that kill, lies, and suppresses, but the narrative absolves them because the camera never lingers. My Phantom Emperor doesn't say, heroes are bad. He says, if you benefit from a corrupt system and never challenge it, what does your goodness really mean? That's not edgy, that's ethical scrutiny. And yes, Deku's silence becomes complicity, not because he's evil, but because the system rewards his obedience. If you benefit from a corrupt system and never challenge it, is your goodness meaningful? That's not villain logic, that's civic ethics. And Shōnen hates civic ethics. I don't write for escapism, I write for reckoning. These stories I make in my free time encourage critical thought of authority, rebellion, empathy, and exposing hypocrisy, and that no authority should be above judgment. And this is one common thing in both of these series that bugged me when I watched them. The commission isn't morally right, the heroes don't fully address the cause of villainy, that being people who are broken and neglected rising up. People like Dobby and Shigaraki are just broken people who got labeled as villains when they lashed out. Demon Slayer doesn't address the dark parts on the Slayer's side. We see how evil demons are, how stoic and brave the Slayers can be, but not the time a Slayer gets paid off to let a demon feed on innocence. I'm drawn to systems first storytelling, not what does this character want, but what systems are they embedded in, who benefits from it, who is quietly sacrificed so it can keep functioning. What happens when someone inside the system sees the rot and refuses to look away? I'm not interested in villains who want chaos. I'm interested in order that is evil precisely because of it. In all my stories that I never put out to the world, there's a single thought line. Systems that justify themselves by claiming to reduce suffering, or quietly deciding who deserves it. My characters don't exist outside these systems. They are products of them, enforcers of them, or anomalies that reveal their hypocrisy. I consistently ask second-order questions that most shonen deliberately avoid because they destabilize the genre. I'm not asking are heroes good, are demons evil. I'm asking who defines good, who benefits from that definition, who gets erased so the story can stay clean. That's why my characters feel like they undermine their worlds. They're not breaking canon, they're interrogating its blind spots. The most dangerous evil isn't disorder, it's order that works too well to question. This video isn't for everyone, it's for those who are already uneasy with hero worship. More simplification and clean narratives built in unseen suffering. I'm finally saying the quiet part out loud. I'm not tearing these worlds down, I'm doing something much more threatening. I'm asking them to justify themselves. I'm not critiquing characters here, I'm critiquing moral architecture. These stories that stay with me aren't the loud ones. They're not about spectacle, explosions, or rebellion for its own sake. They're about characters whose very existence is an act of treason. That's why Code Geass and One Piece matter to me, not as inspiration of style, but for structure. They understand something most shonen stories are afraid to admit. A system doesn't fail because it's attacked. It fails because someone inside it refuses to become what it demands. I don't write characters who overthrow the world by force. I write characters who stand inside the world, bow politely, and make it impossible for the light to survive. I often don't want to write for flair or spectacle, but to have characters whose very existence is an act of treason against the world. I'm not drawn to rebellion as spectacle, I'm drawn to rebellion as existence. That's the key difference. My characters don't scream, they don't posture, they don't even always fight. They continue to exist honestly inside a system that demands performance, obedience, or erasure. That's why my villains feel calm, why my evolutions feel polite, why most dangerous characters often smile. They don't need to announce defiance, their continued authenticity is the crime. I'm not borrowing aesthetics from these stories, I'm borrowing structural courage. People misunderstand Lelouch. They focus on the chessboard, the manipulation, the theatrics. What I resonate with isn't the genius manipulator, but the heart of Code Geass. Lelouch knows moral cleanliness is impossible inside a corrupt system, and chooses to carry the sand himself so others don't have to. That's not villainy, that's sacrifice without applause. He doesn't even expect to be remembered kindly. He simply refuses to let the system decide he must suffer. That's why my characters accept guilt without seeking absolution, let themselves be called monsters, and understand that control, when unavoidable, must be wielded defensively. This isn't a power fantasy, it's a burn fantasy, the willingness to hold the moral weight so someone else can breathe. Luffy isn't ideological, he isn't strategic, he doesn't even articulate his rebellion, but he is uncontrollable, he simply cannot be domesticated. The will of D isn't destiny, it's a pattern. People who the world failed to tame, people who don't fit, people who refuse to shrink so authority can stay comfortable. Luffy doesn't want to fix the world, he exposes it by existing as someone it cannot control. And that's what's missing in stories like Demon Slayer and My Hero Academia. No one ever stops to say, the world isn't broken, it's functioning exactly as designed. That realization changes everything. This isn't just narrative theory, it's lived experience. This focus on exposing the hypocrisy I think comes from my environment. I grew up learning early in a world where love had conditions, belonging required performance, one where silence was rewarded and questions were treated as sin. Being gay in a religious family didn't feel like rebellion, it felt like existing incorrectly. I was the outlier in my family, I asked questions. Just me being born as it was felt like a sin when I was younger. Before learning someone only loving and caring for you with conditions is just control in disguise. I think this upbringing subconsciously carries over into my story taste. Rebellion, self-actualization, being yourself unapologetically, even when the system around you forbids it, while showing kindness and empathy in the process. I think those guiding values convey into my writing. Before I had language for control, I had the feeling of it. That affection could be withdrawn, that care could be conditional, that being myself was something I'd have to justify. And when you grow up like that, you learn something early. Someone who loves you only under condition isn't loving you, they're managing you. The understanding never left me, it simply changed shape. So my stories naturally interrogate this pattern. If love, salvation, or safety requires you to be someone else, what is it really? That's why my authority is never allowed moral finality in my work. I'm not drawn to rebellion and rage, I'm drawn to rebellion and self-recognition. My characters don't shout, they don't posture, they don't even always resist openly. They comply, they succeed, they outperform the hypocrites, and in doing so, they follow the rules too well, until the system has no choice but to reveal what it truly rewards, who it truly protects, and who it was willing to sacrifice. My characters don't overthrow systems by attacking them, they expose them by participating too competently. They balance instead of war, because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is say, fine, I'll follow your rules, let's see where they lead, and then refuse to disappear. Once that happens, the system collapses under its own contradictions. That's quiet treason. If everything I read had to be reduced to a single truth, it would be this: true evil is not cruelty, it is control disguised as care, and the counter to that evil is not chaos, it's empathy without obedience, kindness without submission, and selfhood without apology. That's why my villains are often more honest than heroes, and why heroes sometimes fail, not because they're weak, but because they hesitate to confront the cost of their comfort. I don't want darker stories, I want honest ones. Stories where systems don't get moral immunity, where authority doesn't get narrative protection, where comfort is interrogated, not celebrated. Rebellion doesn't need to be allowed to be lethal. In Shōnen especially, we don't need more cynicism, we need moral clarity without moral arrogance. And sometimes the most bravest thing a character can do is simply exist, unedited, in a world that demands they erase themselves. They call themselves protectors, heroes, saints, governments. They offer comfort first, warmth, structure, safety, and they ask, politely, that you don't look too closely at the knife behind their back. A tyrant never pretends. He doesn't disguise his change as blessings. He doesn't ask you to thank him for the weight on your neck. If I must choose my monster, I'll choose the one who doesn't lie about his teeth. But systems built on comfort teach you something far more dangerous: to confuse obedience with safety, to mistake silence for peace, to accept harm as long as it arrives with a smile. So I ask a question most stories avoid: which is worse, a devil who wants your soul, or a savior who takes pieces of it and calls the laws necessary? The blade you see, or the hand that insists it's for your own good? Power always claims necessity. It calls itself order, it calls itself protection, and when it cuts you, it insists the wound was unavoidable. Tyrants are direct in their cruelty. They demand obedience and never pretend otherwise. But saviors ask you to kneel and thank them for the leash. They don't rule through fear alone, they rule through gratitude. And gratitude, when demanded, is just another form of control. Which is more dangerous, the violence you can name, or the comfort that teaches you not to look? I was taught to be grateful for protection, grateful for structure, grateful for love, so long as I performed correctly. To trust those who promised safety, even when their kindness came with conditions. Belonging had rules, truth had limits. Villains never asked me to pretend. They were honest about what they wanted. But heroes asked me to shrink, to soften my questions, to disappear quietly for the greater good. If evil wears a face, I prefer the one that doesn't ask me to call it love. This is where everything converges. Nihilism is the diagnosis. There is no inherent moral order. Authority is not sacred. Systems are stories we agree to believe. That's why my stories are full of rot, corrupting institutions, hypocritical heroes, and necessary evils pretending to be moral. Institutions that function perfectly while hollowing out the people inside them. My characters see the void. They aren't naive. They know there are no guarantees. While utilitarianism is the temptation. It's not evil. It's seductive. It's efficient. Reduce suffering. Optimize happiness. Smooth the chaos. People are happier when chaos is removed. And sometimes they're right. But we never see the flaws exposed. A balanced world becomes a hollow one. When struggle is erased, so is selfhood. Humans need friction to feel real. That is why psychopaths resonates with me. A world without suffering creates people who don't know they exist. Every optimized world hides the same question. Who decides which suffering is acceptable? Who benefits from peace? What part of humanity must be amputated to maintain order? And the answer is never clean. A balanced world does not create meaning, it creates quiet, and quiet is not the same as peace. I'm not anti-order, I'm anti-unexamined order. The world offers no fairness, no final justice, no promised meeting. Governments promise order, systems promise safety, both demand obedience in return. Perhaps nothing's truly good or evil, perhaps there is only suffering and the quiet agreement about how much of it is acceptable. But a world without struggle does not create happiness, it creates silence. So if meaning must be invented, let it be forged by those who stand anyway. Not because the world deserves it, but because surrender would be easier, and refusing ease, refusing silence, refusing to disappear, is the first act of rebellion.